So the year was 1999. I was 13 years old. The location, a sleepover with all of my best girlfriends. The occasion, well, the new Destiny's Child album, The Writings on the Wall, had just come out. And we felt like listening to it for an entire night on repeat was the only way to mark such a glorious occasion. And since that fateful day in 1999, my love for Beyonce has only gotten stronger. And I know I am not the only one. And yes, shout out to the Beehive. And if you don't know who Destiny's Child is, this was the girl group that Beyonce was a part of before she started her solo career. And since then, Beyonce has grown to be one of the best artists of our time. With over 100 million records sold, she's won 20 Grammys. She's become the most nominated woman in Grammy history. She has sold out world tours. She has more statistics and has broken more records than I'm going to use for my entire time today. But Beyonce is a woman at the top of her game, and America has loved her. And on February 6, 2016, Beyonce released a new single, Formation, complete with a music video and a next day Super Bowl halftime performance. Now, most of us are familiar with Beyonce. We've heard her music, we've seen her perform either live or on TV. But this was a different Beyonce. We saw her paying homage to the Black Panthers at the Super Bowl. We saw her standing against police brutality in her Formation video. And this is one of the first times where we didn't see Beyonce singing something like Bootylicious or Single Ladies, and a lot of people didn't like it. The critics came pouring in, and I realized something. America's reaction to Beyonce highlighted a much more subtle, more nuanced issue we have in our country. See, we like Beyonce when she's singing Bootylicious or Single Ladies because she's sassy, she's sexual, and she is a stereotype of what we want Black women to be. But when she shows a less monolithic character of herself, and ultimately of Black women, we didn't like that as much. And now we're in a space and time in our country where racial tensions are high, people are protesting, people are polarized, and what we see every day on our social media feeds and on the news are people standing on extremes of every side of this issue. But I want to argue that a lot of America's problem with race comes from a smaller, more invisible form. Sometimes, I think when we talk about race, a lot of us can think about slavery or former civil rights leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. or Rosa Parks, and it feels like a reality of the distant past that has little to do with how we live our everyday lives today. And I want to disagree, and here's why. So Terrence Roberts, he's one of the Little Rock Nine. They were the first 9 students to integrate the Little Rock school system. Well, he talks about a principle that social psychologist Malcolm Gladwell highlights in his book Outliers, except he frames it around race. In the book Outliers, Gladwell talks about something called the 10,000-hour rule. And the 10,000-hour rule is this. If you spend 10,000 hours intentionally practicing something, you become an expert on that thing. But here's the catch. Once you become an expert in something, about 70% of that action gets relegated to your subconscious. You've put in the hours, you've done it enough, and it becomes sort of automatic. For example, if you were to ask gold medal gymnast Simone Biles how she jumps on a 3-inch beam, does a no-handed cartwheel, 4 flips off the back, and lands squarely on her feet, how she does it, she'll only be able to give you about 30% of that answer. Why? She's put in her 10,000 hours, she's become an expert, and when she gets on the beam, her body knows what to do. It becomes automatic. Okay, so what does any of this have to do with race? Well, I want to give you some dates. The first is 1619. 1619. This represents the year that the first Africans were brought to the U.S. as slaves. The second date is 1954. 1954 is the year of Brown versus Board of Education. This is the case that was meant to desegregate our country. Now, for the sake of this example, let's assume that in 1954, our country integrated and everything was great. We know that that's not the truth, but just track with me. So 1619 to 1954. This represents a span of 335 years. Now, for these 335 years, our country intentionally practiced the dehumanization of, the abuse of, the exploitation of, and the segregation from Black people in this country. For those 335 years, Black people were owned as property, were refused citizenship, were treated as less than, were bought and sold as commodity, used for entertainment, and disregarded. Now, if you're wondering how that time breaks down, those 335 years represent 294 10,000-hour units. So our country became an expert 294 times on the dehumanization of, the oppression of, the abuse of, and segregation from Black people in this country. Now remember, once you become an expert in something, 70% of that action gets relegated to your subconscious. So if we look around and we ask ourselves, why are racial tensions still so high? Why are so many parts of our country still so segregated? What is going on? If we trust our automatic responses, we'll only be able to give you about 30% of that answer. Now, assuming that in 1954, when legally some things changed, we've only even been trying to do something different for 62 years. Okay, so back to Beyonce. What does any of this have to do with Beyonce? Well, Beyonce is a Black woman in America. A country that has become an expert on expecting certain things from people who look like Beyonce. They have been our entertainers. They have been our commodities. They've been our sassy friends, our eye rollers, our comedic relief. And we don't even realize how deeply comfortable we are with the roles that we have created for one another until someone like Beyonce shows us another side and we don't like it. Our automatic responses tell us, no, she should be singing Bootylicious or Single Ladies. We like that Beyonce. That's the role she should fill. So you may be asking yourself, so then what do we do? How can we move beyond this? Well, renowned poet and author Maya Angelou has a beautiful quote that says this: first, recognize that I'm a Black woman, and then forget that I'm a Black woman. We will not be able to move past race in this country until we are willing to acknowledge what race has meant and continues to mean for how we interact with one another, what we expect from one another, how we see one another. Please do not fall into the lie that we shouldn't see color. Instead, face head-on the fact that this country's expertise in segregation, oppression, and racism has created subconscious realities of what we want each other to do, where we think we should be, how we think we should talk, live, where we should go. And the only way to move past that is to move through it. We can no longer rely on our automatic responses to tell us how to treat one another. Instead, we need to start intentionally practicing something else and understand that we are working against a 335-year-long deficit. So if we're going to move past it, it's going to have to be intentional. We have to start becoming experts in something different. So to put this all in Beyonce terms, you can no longer have our Bootylicious if you're not willing to understand our formation. Thank you.